Hello and welcome to today's webinar on the topic of optical character recognition with Squish GUI Tester 6.5. My name is Florian Turk. I'm a technical sales engineer and I'm hosting today's webinar. With me is Jaroslav Kubik. He's the lead developer, software engineer who can show you this feature in detail. Thanks for joining once again, and you will have the chance to send us questions. You're muted actually, but if you want to ask something, feel free to use the GoToWebinar client. There is a option to post questions, and we will have a question and answer session at the end of the webinar, and we will collect questions which we might not answer immediately in the webinar since we prepared a presentation. But we will collect the questions and answer them at the end for sure. All right, thanks a lot. So before going into the details of Squish 6.5 and the OCR feature, I'll give a short introduction to those who have no idea about FrogLogic and our tool, or who are new to Squish GUI Tester in general. So FrogLogic, our company, exists since quite a while now, established in 2003, and we are based in Hamburg, Germany, and do have a presence in the US as well. We are a QA-focused company, so that means that we develop and distribute two main tools, which are Squish GUI Tester, which we talk about today, and Squish Coco, which I'd like to mention as well. Coco is a code coverage analysis tool which you can use to measure different metrics which might be required by safety standards, which are applicable to some industries like automotive or medical. So if you're interested in that, we also host webinars on Coco frequently, so they will be announced on our website. But today we are focusing on the Squish GUI Tester, which is used by many customers out there, customers coming from all kinds of industries. So you can see some example logos here. We got many more. You can see that all of those companies are quite diverse. So I already mentioned the automotive industry, but we have a lot of medical companies using Squish, IT, communication companies, and pretty much everything you can think of worldwide. So Squish is generic, and it's generic in the sense that it's a cross-platform testing tool, which means it can automate and test applications running on all those different operating systems, including embedded Linux, which is quite important to mention. So you can test on your embedded hardware if you got some. And Squish is also quite generic regarding the technologies which it supports. So we do have support for many different toolkits, GUI toolkits, we got different Squish editions applicable to the different technologies which your application might use to show the UI. We won't go into the details of that today, because what we will focus on today applies to all different test setups and technologies which are supported by Squish. So today we are talking about the new OCR feature. But before moving on to that, I'd like to sum up the past feature innovations we introduced to the Squish GUI tester over the past years. So first of all, the base of the Squish GUI tester is the record and replay approach. You can start a recording, use your application as you would normally do it as a user to generate a test and then finally play back the test to reproduce exactly what you've done in an automated fashion. And that is realized through a number of scripting languages that we support. So it's a very flexible approach. We use industry standard scripting languages for that, or we offer different choices actually. On top of that, we introduced something called BDD, Behavior Driven Development, which is a layer of abstraction above the scripting itself. So it's a test-driven approach which allows to write down a test specification and automate it through record and playback once again after that. And it really helps to have a common document with all the different stakeholders to discuss the features of your application and also tightly couple them with the actual development and testing so that you can make sure that everything you've written down in the beginning when specifying the features of your application is really covered by the test and the application itself, of course. We then introduced visual verifications, which are really, really powerful. So I've mentioned the different toolkits which are supported by Squish. And we used to have verifications before introducing the visual verifications, of course. So there were property and screenshot verifications. We were able to check the internal states of the UI objects, but visual verifications are more powerful in the way that they offer to or feature to verify a group of objects, complex GUI controls, including their visual appearance, including their internal states. So as GUI tests are typically automated and executed in an automated fashion, it's quite important to have something like this because typically no one sits in front of the screen and makes sure that things actually look like they should. And this can be done by Squish. It will make sure that your application fulfills all the functional requirements, but also is displayed in the way you would like to have it. Squish 6.4 was all about image-based testing. So in general, I think Jarek, which is the nickname of Yaroslav, will go into some details of that as well. But in general, Squish is based on object recognition, so it really knows about all the GUI controls of your application, and it is able to look up the objects by taking a look at the internal states and all the properties which are set inside of the GUI objects. In some rare cases, that does not really work. Some special areas like OpenGL painted panels in your application, or sometimes applications integrate with third-party tools, third-party controls, which are not recognized at that layer from scratch. And in those cases, image-based testing can be an additional approach to recognize controls of the application and to automate the application based on that. So basically, you'll look for some image appear on the screen, which you can then interact with. That is still rather new, so 6.4, and in 6.5 we added another feature which really goes hand in hand with the image-based testing, which is the optical character recognition in Squish 6.5. So we are able to find text which is displayed, and it's really powerful because it does not restrict to a specific rendering. So image-based testing is really that we have to look for a specific image on screen, but text can be rendered in different ways. And since we are talking about cross-platform testing as well, text might look different on different test environments, different machines you're testing on. And that's the OCR based testing feature, which we will introduce to you right now. So yeah, I'll hand over to Jaroslav to let him continue with the live demonstration of the new features. So let me switch to him, and I hope he will be able to share his screen right now. So Jaroslav, are you there? Yeah, that looks good. Okay, so
hi. So I will be presenting the new OCR feature, and I have chosen the applications specifically that I will be using for the presentation specifically for it. So the application I will be using is a Qt-based CAD application called QCAD, and I preloaded it already with an example file that will be also helpful for our presentation. So as Florian have already mentioned, Squish generally uses toolkit information, like information about standard controls, like menus, buttons, toolbars, and other components like that for testing, and it makes these components browsable, as you can see here, and also their properties accessible, and it allows testing based on that information. And in vast majority of applications, that is enough or nearly enough to test entirety of the functionality of the application. But as Florian already also said, in some cases that isn't enough, and here the CAD application they have chosen is one of such examples, because the main widget, main component of the application that is actually showing the drawing isn't really accessible in that way. As we can see, it doesn't really have any accessible children objects, and that is quite difficult to impossible to test such application using standard object-based approach, because there is quite a lot of structure in that component. So now the first feature that could help with that we have introduced was the image-based search. And now I will create a new test case, and I will firstly attempt to use the image-based search to interact with the application. So I will record a new test case. And in order to, I will click on an image. So I'm selecting an image now, for example, this component here, and I insert the mouse click action on it. And if I stop the recording, you will see that the Squish has captured the search image here and recorded the corresponding action on that image, on that visual, and that allows us to somehow interact with the contents, with the particular parts of that big component that would be otherwise inaccessible in detail, which details would be inaccessible. But the text is always a big problem, especially to cross-platform testing in that context, because text is rendered differently, even on a different program run, and especially on different platforms, style settings, zoom settings, etc. In order to test the properties and interactions on the text components rendered this way, we need to use OCR. And so I will record the test, another test case. Yes, and this time I will click on one of the text instances available here. I will use a double click action on the OCR. And as you can see, the OCR takes some time. And now we can see the screenshot with the OCR text overlaid on top of it as a series of rectangles that are recognized, and we can press and drag to select the text that we are interested in. And when that is done, we will see the number of matches that we have selected. And as you can see, the OCR isn't always perfect. It generates some artifacts. So in here we have on the right side we have the one match that we are probably not interested in. This is just an artifact. There is no text like that in there. So we will select the other one, spline FP, and I will insert the double click on that element. So the Squish will now perform OCR once again, just to make sure that everything is in a consistent state, and perform a double click. And that opens the addition component. So now I can change the text, for example. So now I will remove the selection. And now I can go back to Squish and verify that my action, you can use OCR to verify that my action actually had a desired effect on the application. So we can also use OCR for verifications. And I will again select the text that has changed. As you can see, it is recognized correctly. And I will insert the verification. So if we stop the recording, we can see the actions that we have recorded. So now the text was double clicked, the selected text. This is the addition, removal of the selection, and the text that was changed, it was verified, is verified. If I replay the test, it will perform these actions. Hopefully without any failures. Yes. So the text was correctly found, and the test has passed. So in this way, we can interact with the text elements that are not otherwise accessible to Squish. So now the multiple occurrences of the text, if I can, I will create another test case to demonstrate that. So if we want to click on a particular occurrence of a text, the IDE automatically handles that when you perform the text selection in this window. So we have here, for example, the multiple occurrences of the word spline. So if I select, let's say, a word spline here, you will see that multiple occurrences of the word spline are actually highlighted on the screenshot. But we are only interested in the one that I've selected. So if I insert the double click on that control, and I will stop the recording now, we will see that the occurrence number was recorded, and that's basically the index of the occurrence on the screen, starting from the top left corner of the screen. Unfortunately, there is no better way of delimiting the occurrences of the text. But if we have multiple occurrences of the same text, sometimes at least we can use the search region feature that allows us to limit the area of the OCR, which both improves the performance and allows us to avoid the finding matches that we are maybe not interested in at the moment. So we can do this by inserting a very OCR action as before. But now we can select interesting text and use the component of the search region on the bottom right here to select only the canvas that we are interested in. So we are not interested in any other controls like the toolbars, menu bars, and other parts of the application. And then the OCR will only be performed on that component. Yes, so the double click was correctly performed. Oh, that is a failure. That was unexpected. Let me try it again. So I will be recording again with the search region.
Yaroslav, I think you missed to enable the checkbox. I just spotted that when you did that. It's still set to use entire desktop. So
Yes.
um,
Yes, you are correct. I have not clicked the checkbox. Sorry,
yeah.
that was my mistake. Yes. So now, if I select some text, like this one here, for example, and insert it, click on that. Yes. So now we have combination of object-based testing and the OCR search. So we use the object that we know of using object based lookup as a search region for the OCR to limit the area that is actually searched, and perform OCR only on that. In our case, in our application, that is only a small limitation because, as I mentioned before, the entire canvas was already inaccessible to us using the object-based lookup. So I cannot search for some subrectangle in that area. But what we can do is, for example, use that feature as well to test for positions in relation between components. So I will record another test case. And this time, I will insert just a dummy instruction that I will then modify manually. Like text here. And then I will insert the verification of some of the text beneath that text. Like the line we used before. So there are also some artifacts. I will have to select the correct text. And if I stop the recording, I can now modify the script to use the result of the previous OCR lookup as a search region for another one. And extend basically the rectangle that was returned from the first text search, and use that rectangle as a search region for another for the verification, to verify that the verified text is actually in the vicinity or below the text searched for before. So this way we can also test the relative positions between elements. So we can use that feature in that way. And it should replay as well. takes a moment. Oh, I might have made some mistakes because it doesn't verify correctly. Maybe the range was too small. So I will try it again.
Yeah, maybe just one comment from my side that takes a bit because Squish, of course, tries to find things on screen for some timeout. Same applies to the normal verification points. So we got some timeouts here to give the application a bit of time to actually get into the state where things are shown and can be verified. But yeah, something else goes wrong, I guess.
Yes, so as Flo, you mentioned, that actually uses it actually performs multiple OCRs and waiting for the proper text to be found. I'm having difficulty demonstrating that feature right now. But in general, this is how it can be leveraged to show some sort of interaction between some sort of relationship between different elements. So now moving on to moving back to the recorded text here, for example. So there are some drawbacks to the OCR. It cannot detect the text that is somehow overlaid or otherwise distorted. So, for example, here we were forced to remove the selection from the item that we were about to verify, as we have here with edited text, because the selection draws an overlay on top of that item. So the OCR gets thrown off by it. If I try to verify a text that is selected, then it will usually come out recognized slightly incorrectly. Oh, this time it actually went fine. But if that button is rendered slightly more on top of the text, or there are some additional features that are disturbing the text, or especially in case of like CAD applications, the text will often be overlaid on top of other items, maybe. That there may be some problems with recognition, so we have to find ways to avoid that. The OCR itself isn't perfect either. There are some cases where items are not found or slightly or found slightly incorrectly. That is the unfortunate consequence of using OCR as a technology in general. As I showed you already, it produces some artifacts which have to be avoided. It produces as well. So you have to be aware that it is you cannot expect it to be 100% accurate all of the time. It can also have problems with smaller text. But if there are issues like that, Squish supports also other OCR engines. Currently, we're using the Tesseract OCR, which is an open source engine. Currently, we also support two online OCR engines, and we are looking into integrating even more possibilities into the end. So all of these engines are very different, and their quality is also different. But also their licensing. So the Tesseract OCR is open source. So that's a good starting place because it can be simply installed and tried out. But other engines require a bit more setup and therefore should be tried only if the Tesseract isn't enough. So with that, I will go back to Flog. Do we have any questions?
I think so far we don't have any questions, but feel free to post your question. GoToMeeting has some oops, sorry about that. GoToMeeting has some option to post a question. So it depends on if you're using the GoToWebinar client, desktop client, or the web client. But we would be happy to answer your questions. So while I'm waiting for some questions to arrive, I got one question. So Jaroslav, is the OCR feature something which can be a replacement for the object-aware approach which we have in Squish, or is it just an addition so that we can use it for special cases?
Yes, so as I already mentioned before, I especially chose even the application for that presentation because it has components that are not accessible to Squish. So due to the disadvantages I mentioned, like potential inaccuracy of the OCR, and also because of the time that it takes to perform, which is much slower than the regular object-based lookup, we should always defer to the standard object-based testing as long as it is possible, and use the OCR only on elements that are not accessible in that way.
Yeah, I see. And if you're using it, you can, as you have shown, restrict the area that is actually used for the recognition to improve the performance. But still, the object where approach, which takes a look at the actual UI control and its internal properties, is way more robust, I would say. There's one question from the audience. So, does background color behind text affect the OCR? Jaroslav, I guess no, right?
So as I was already saying, the text distortion in general can have influence. In general, yes. That is generally true for OCR. In general, the OCR engines aren't that good in some very colorful and with some colorful backgrounds. Some of it can be and is already removed by Squish by pre-processing the image. So if there is some strong contrast between the text and the background, then the Squish will usually be able to remove most of it as a pre-processing step. but that is not always guaranteed.
Okay. Yeah, another question is about the OCR library or framework which is used by Squish. So is that installed separately, or is it built in with Squish?
Yes, so the Tesseract engine needs to be installed separately simply because of the size of the package, which is comparable with the Squish installation itself. So it has to be installed separately, and it integrates with Squish very nicely. The other engines that I was mentioning before, they are online engines, so you don't really need to install anything. You just need the appropriate access keys for that, and therefore are available just with regular Squish package.
Okay, yeah. So there might be others to follow, which we might use instead of Tesseract. Yeah. And there's one question about moving objects. So is it possible to use the OCR feature with moving objects or pictures? I assume that there's some timeout or interval which can be set to tell Squish about how often it should check for the presence of some text, right?
Yes, so we generally have the parameters for timeout and interval of how often the checks should be performed. The Squish function, the Squish functions we have demonstrated today are waiting functions, so they do not perform only one search, but they do it repeatedly until the item is found. In case of moving elements, there is obviously a synchronization element, which is also difficult to capture with the timeouts, as obviously any such data immediately becomes stale because the application state is constantly changing.
For sure. So synchronization is really a topic of its own, and it's really something, test engineers have to be aware of. So we have to make sure when automating an application that we really synchronize with the state of the objects and controls which are shown, and that might be kind of a problem. And if possible, of course, we should use the object recognition feature, since that might be more robust. For example, if you recognize a label which is somehow moved around, it will be looked up by the text and the type of the object, and it does not depend on the actual coordinates or place where it is displayed, for sure. So but still it might work to a certain degree. All right. We still have a bit of time, but since there are no additional questions, I'd like to give you some information about an upcoming event from FrogLogic. So we are hosting the Squish Days Europe 2019 in Munich this year. So that is a user conference all about Squish GUI Tester and Squish Coco. It takes place in Munich in October 17th and 18th. There are still tickets available for that. So if you're interested, it will be a 2-day event. One day will be or will offer a number of workshops, so you can learn about our tools, go into the details of specific features, of course, also learn about the OCR feature, and the second day will be a conference program. So we will have talks held by FrogLogic engineers. So you will have the chance to discuss your Squish work with our developers, but also we'll have some guests at the Squish Days coming from companies which are already using Squish, and they will present their projects, their FrogLogic tool usage, and I guess it will be quite an interesting event. It will be a great opportunity to get in touch with our engineers, but also to get in touch with other Squish users. So if you're interested, there's more information on our website. You can also get in contact with us if you get any questions. There's a temporary agenda already available, which you will also find on our website. So there's one additional question coming in, which is about a free trial of Squish. Yes, there is a free trial. It's great that you ask about that. So you can try out Squish. You can try out the Squish GUI Tester, and you can also try out our code coverage tool for free. Those trials are technically unlimited, so you will get the full feature set. It's just time limited. So if you're interested, simply visit our website. There is a form to request a evaluation version, and you will get login credentials immediately to get started and try out our tools. You will be eligible to make use of our support as well. So if there are any questions when trying out Squish within the trial period, we will be there to help you. You will get the same email-based support our commercial customers receive. So we would be pleased to send you a trial of Squish to let you try it out by yourself. All right, I guess that's it. So Jaroslav, thanks a lot for your presentation. It was really, really interesting to see how to use the new OCR feature in detail, to discuss a couple of points, when to use it, when not to use it, to go into the details of this. Thanks a lot for attending the webinar. If there are any questions to follow up on, feel free to send us an email to squish@froglogic.com. We will be happy to answer that. Sorry about the noise in the background. Thanks a lot for joining today. I hope you had an interesting webinar, and have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Bye.